today we're going to start to dive into actually using Python to analyze data.
Very exciting.
So when we thought about this course, we had a choice to make on what programming language do we want to use. And we really want to give you an experience of using the most industry standard, widely used programming language, and that is Python. But there's other languages we could have chosen, and they are all have equal functionality. So you can use a language like R. Is a language that you've learned in the past, Carly?
Yep, R is really common in statistics courses and in industry when you're doing statistics work.
But in computer science and data science in general, you're going to see that almost everyone uses Python. And Python is the most widely used programming language today and has a lot of really great libraries to help us out. And one library that we're going to focus on in Python is the Pandas library. And the Pandas library is a data science library that's going to help us analyze data sets as well as quickly load them in. So every single time we start writing Python, we're going to open up a Python notebook. And for the beginning of this class, we're going to dive into a web-based Python notebook that's provided by Google called Google Colab. But once you get to working on the labs and projects, you're going to dive into a Jupyter notebook running on your own computer. So you're going to go get both the experience of really quickly being able to dive into the programming language, as well as knowing how to use it on your own computer.
Exactly.
So as soon as you bring up a Python notebook, you're going to be able to import the Pandas library by simply writing a single command, which says import pandas as PD. And this imports the Pandas library, which is a library that researchers and programmers have written that we're going to make use of. And we're going to call this library PD. So everywhere you see PD in the rest of our code, we're referring to the Pandas library.
Why do we call it PD?
Why
don't we just call it Pandas?
To be completely honest, I don't know. So this is something that every example you see is that they're going to use PD. But I have a feeling it's because really as a programmer, we're really lazy. We do not want to type more than we have to type. And PD sort of gets the kind of strongest letters out of Pandas.
Yeah, and that is a lot easier to type PD than Pandas.
So you're going to see every so often you might see examples where they do pandas dot something, but almost always you're going to see us use simply PD. And that's what I'm going to use in all of my work in this series. And it's what I do professionally when I write any code.
Perfect.
So this first line is going to be the first line we always run. And then the second line we're going to run is we're always going to import a data set. So to import the data set, we're going to call this data set a data frame. And a data frame is an object that the Python programming language is going to create that's going to contain all of the data that we read in from a CSV. So if you think back to basic algebra, you can think of something like x equals 4. And when you have x equals 4, you're assigning this variable x with the value 4. And we're doing the exact same thing in Python. But unlike algebra, where you might have to then solve x is equal to x plus 2 or something, we're going to not have to ever solve anything because the computer is going to do all the hard work for us.
We like that.
Yes. Instead, we're just going to have to worry about what do we assign values to. So this data frame, we want to assign the data from a data set to this data frame. So to do that, we're always going to ask the Pandas library. So remember, Pandas are referring to as PD. So we'll write PD. And then every time that we have an object and we want to refer to some functionality of the object, we're going to place a dot. So we've got this Pandas library, which we're calling PD. And we want to ask the Pandas library to read a CSV.
What's a CSV?
So a CSV is a special type of data file that we can store on the computer that's both machine readable and human readable. So if we think about a data set, one data set that you've already looked at and that you contributed to is the perception of probability words.
Party words.
Sorry, party words.
Yeah.
We'll look at the...
We're going to look at a probability words data set as well.
Thanks, Carly.
No problem.
So in the party words, we're going to... You answered how many people you thought were a couple of people at the party. And you answered how many people you thought were many people at a party, as well as a number of other columns. So as part of this data set, we're going to have this structured data where everything's labeled and well organized. And the very first column that you're going to see, that you don't see in a CSV file, but you do see when we're importing it into Pandas, is going to be a column that we refer to as the index. which is simply a number that starts at 0 and grows up. So the very first row of data, a couple could be your response. So Carly, how many people do you think, if you had a party last weekend, if you said just a couple of people were at your party, how many people were you referring to?
So for some reason, I always think of 2 as a couple.
Awesome. And I agree with you. I also think of 2 as a couple. If many people were at your party, how many people do you think were at your party?
Probably around 30.
30.
Yeah.
So Carly thinks 30 people are many.
That's many.
I think many people are really just like about 10. It's a lot of people. You can see the introverting me coming out.
Yep.
So what we have here is we have a data set that contains both our responses and all of your responses. And inside a computer, we have to represent this data set in some way. So a CSV file represents this data set by having the column headers being listed on the first line. So the first line is in a CSV file is going to contain a couple, and then we're going to have a comma separating each column header because the CSV stands for comma separated values. So a couple, comma many, comma all of the other fields, all the other variables that are in our data set.
Got it.
Then every other line in the file, besides the first line, is going to contain the data, again separated by commas. So index row 0 is Carly's answers, which she thought 2 was a couple, then 30 was many, and a number of other answers. The next one is me. I thought 2 was a couple as well, then 10 was many, and so on. And this is a CSV file called comma separated values. And this is going to be a way that Excel, Google Sheets, Numbers, or any other application you use to work with spreadsheets will be able to export your data as a CSV file.
Perfect. Should we look at the party data set?
Yeah, let's go ahead and load in one of these CSV files into our data set, or into our pandas library. So going back to the code, we have df, which is our data frame that we're going to store our data in, is going to be equal to pd.read_csv. And then the read CSV needs a parameter to tell it what it should read. And anytime you're going to inform a function what it should do, you're going to open a parentheses and then give the argument to that function inside the parentheses. So the argument for read CSV, all we need to tell Python is where can we find the CSV file.
And Wade, you said all of our data sets are located on your faculty website, right?
Yep, so I've already hosted these data sets. They're all in CSV format. So we're simply going to need to type the full web address. So that's going to be https:// notice this is all in quotes, waf.cs.illinois.edu/discovery. And this part of the web address will always be the same. And then because we're looking at the party data set, it's going to be party.csv.
CSV. Okay,
And then
I
we'll
have typed it in.
Make sure to close the quotes because the quotes need to match. And then make sure to close the parentheses.
Ooh, I have one quick question.
Yes.
So I put double quotes and so did you, but I don't really like double quotes. Can you use single quotes if you wanted to?
So in Python, you can use either double quotes or single quotes.
Great.
As long as you're consistent. So if you want to use single quotes on both sides, that's great. If you want to use double quotes, that's great. But you can't mix and match single and double quotes, one or the other.
Good to know. All right, I'm going to go ahead and press Shift-Enter to run this line of code. And I did not get an error message.
Yes, so anytime you have a cell inside of a Python notebook, pressing Shift-Enter will run that cell, and it'll run it from top to bottom. So here we're going to mainly focus on cells that just have a single line of code. So df is equal to pd.read_csv is going to read the CSV, put it into our data frame. Then the third cell, we're just going to go ahead and write df, because whenever you write a single variable inside of a cell, it's going to display the result of that cell. So if you type df, what do you see, Carly?
I actually see the party words data set, and I see all of the rows containing the data and then the names of the columns in the first row.
Awesome. So you're going to see all of the columns just like we see here. And then you'll see on the very left-hand side, you see a list of bold numbers.
Ooh, I do. Yes, starting with 0.
Starting with 0. So as computer scientists, we're going to start counting from 0. And this is going to be what we call the index of the row. So the index is a 0-based counting mechanism. We'll start counting from 0, 1, 2, 3. You'll notice the index is just a way we refer to the data inside of the data frame. and isn't actually present from the CSV. It's something that Python automatically adds for us. And we'll talk more about this index as we go through this series.
Yes, and I can see all the way up to index number 55.
Awesome. All 56 people who have now taken our survey.
Great.